So a little ATV we did the carb on and had to fix some wiring on. Still got to put a chain on there and change the oil and check some other stuff on it, tighten up bolts and bolt the body back down, but she runs. Still got to button up the wiring harness, but this should be good. Did away with solenoid and all that crap because wiring harness is really tore up on this thing. Just bypass it and run a regular push button starter like on from a tractor or something. Got tired of losing money on this thing. Got tired of chasing every little problem on this thing. Wiring harness was pretty much fried. Black and white wire was grounded to some other wire. And the black and white wire is what kills the ignition on these things. It goes to the module and the left handlebar switch. It had melted the wiring in the switch. Where it was rubbing on was actually up. I had to split the harness apart and separate. The black and white wire was where the green grounds were. They solder like 4 or 5 or 6 wires together, and a big chunk of solder rubbed through the black wire up inside the housing, up inside the sheathing in the wiring harness. Split the harness up and did that. Let me see if this thing will start now. Yep, starts and runs. Got this thing is the one that didn't have an exhaust system on it at all. Not even a broken one, just nothing on there from the head back, and they'd been riding it like that before. And then it quit running because a bunch of little things on it just didn't work. Battery was deader than dead. I'd charge it and it'd come up to almost 14 volts. Then as soon as you go to hit the starter button on it, it'd shoot down to like 2 volts. And yesterday, while I was charging the other battery, I was messing around with the harness and it had all of 0 volts, like 0.00 volts in the battery with a load on it. That's just dead. But we got everything on there pretty much. Like I said, got to change the oil and tape the harness back up where I split it all apart, and that should be good. And finished putting the exhaust on. I found a pipe and got a rig up to put a muffler on there. And the pipe I got doesn't actually fit, so I'm going to have to weld brackets on there to hold it. It's got nothing to hold the pipe. It's just bolted up to the head now. You try and run it like that, it'll crack, break the pipe off. I have to weld some brackets at the back of it there, put a muffler on and weld a bracket on that to the frame so it'll hold steady. So little kids will tear this thing up. Well, let's change the oil. The drain plug is all the way up at the front of the motor. It's a 17 millimeter. There's another plug that's under there that's off to the side in the back, or off to the side. That one's the spring and plunger for the cam chain tensioner. So the front's all the way at the front towards the center. While you're up under there doing these things, the motor mounts come loose on them pretty on a regular basis. Wouldn't be a bad idea to grab some sockets and tighten down the motor mounts, the 4 at the bottom and the 1 at the back. That attaches to the frame. Get the oil good and hot, drain it. And these things, you want to change them pretty often because there ain't no filter in there. And these things, truthfully, they usually sit around more. If you have a new one, the oil in them, if you pull the oil out and smell it, it smells like fish. If it smells like fish, you need to change it on your new one pretty quick. Don't run it a lot with that oil in there. That's like the cheapest Chinese grade of oil you can buy. It's like, I don't even know what it is. It's cheap and it breaks down really easy. So I just run straight 30 weight in here. I already had a couple of quarts in that, but it holds less than a quart. I think it holds like 3/4 of a quart, something like that. So if you save up your oil for the last 1/4 of a quart you got, how many ever ounces that is, and just save them up, over time you'll have enough for another oil change. If you do 3 oil changes, you'll have a 3/4 oil or 3/4 quart of oil left. You want to check the fasteners on these things pretty regularly. Lube the chains that come on there. We're going back with the RK Takasago chain. This one's a 428 chain. Some of them come with 420s. This one had a 428. Just use a good quality chain. Keep the chains cleaned and lubed. Front steering stuff comes loose on this thing too. So you want to do those. Shoot some lube down your front brake cables. I use dry slide because it's easier, but really you could use anything in there. Dry slide's what I use. It works better for me. It's a pen oiler. You just stick it down the cable and lube the hell out of them. I think this one, when we got it, well, I know they'd been riding it with no exhaust on there, and it needed a chain and didn't have brakes on it. They didn't have rear brakes. Just got them on there. They just didn't work. And tires are low on this thing. Back ones are anyway. So we'll lube the cables, lube the throttle cable, lube the brake cables, front brake cables. And by putting a new chain on there, sprockets look fine. And another thing, check your rear axle to see if that thing's tight. It's got an adjustment on it where the axles actually go through there. There's just a lock ring over here with a nut on it. If you jack the ass end up, and you can slide it back and forth a little bit. If it's got any play in it, it's too loose. Now you don't want to over tighten them, you just want it snug so you got no back and forth play on the axle. You don't want it walking back and forth. You're going to wear stuff out like that. And go over your sprocket bolts. Front sprocket bolt, rear sprocket bolts. Your adjusters, make sure your adjusters are tight and your actual axle housing is tight in the swing arm there. Back there, I think there's 4 bolts. There's like 2 at the bottom and 2 at the top. You're going to tighten those. Just grab a handful of wrenches and start tightening stuff, really. Just ain't rattle your teeth out. Try not to overload them. I had a guy buy one for his grandson years ago. He was out riding it and went over a little bit of hill, got some air on it, and a brand new thing. And it broke the frame right over here. Right where the swing arm goes in there, it just snapped it off from his big butt on there. And with a kid on it, it probably would have handled it, but you know, 220-pound guy, it's not really made for that. Really, that's about it. What I'm talking about up here in the front is where these bars go in here. You'll have some play. You want to tighten those up and shoot some lube down in the spindles where the steering shaft goes through. It's just riding in plastic. But anything we can do to remedy that is good. Your front brakes, you got two cables. You need to adjust them so they're both even, so you're not pulling on one brake or the other one. And all you're going to do is check your play up here. You can pull one cable out more than the other one. You can tell right off. Let me pull this over here so you can actually see what I'm doing. I don't know if you can see that or not. Maybe you can. I know I can't see with the sun glaring off of it, but if you see that, that cable's a little bit tighter than this one. You just want them even. Now, if you want to be a stickler about it, you jack the front brake, jack the front end up and spin it while you have somebody pulling it. Spin a wheel. And you don't want them scrubbing. You just want it tight enough that they're pulling equally on both sides. And these things too, this one's still got it on there. If you look right here, you look at that little screw right there. If you can see it, let me bring this thing down a little bit. The screw right here, that's what sets your throttle. So you notice right there, it's got that much. That's like all the way throttle. So if you want it only a little bit of throttle, you can adjust this in so it only opens throttle up so much for like little kids. So you can taper it to them. You know, you want to start off where the throttle just barely opens and goes with the kid on it. And that'll keep them slow. And then as they go, you can move it out a little bit at a time and just lock the set screw down until it's going full throttle. That one's actually moving pretty good. We're still going to shoot some lube down in there, but you get the idea. Tires aren't the best in the world on these things. They work, but there's definitely better tires on them. You have to realize that these things only, you know, for a while there, you know, of course, prices are going up. For a while there, you could buy these things drop shipped to your house for like $400. So they're not going to put a boatload of money into them. And when they buy them, distributors, you buy them like a container load, like 40, 60, or 80 units in a container. And there's no warranty on them. So if you get 40 of them and 35 of them run and are decent enough to sell, the rest of them you scavenge for parts if you need them, because they don't come with any parts. You have to order, you know, if you needed levers, or you needed cables, or regulator, or ignition module, or whatever. You have to order all that stuff separate. But a good setup on these things will have them running longer than they typically will if you don't do any setup at all. Now this one, you know, they bought this used for, I don't know how much they paid for it, but it was dirt cheap. And it had been well used. So if you get a used one, just go over everything on it like you do anything else maintenance wise. You know, lube the cables, keep the chain adjusted, keep the oil changed on them, air filter, battery charged up, keep fresh gas in them, and ride them. Really, that's about it. The only other problem I've ever had with them was, you know, keep the valves adjusted right, and they'll be good, better than if you don't adjust them at all. You know, if you got one that's starts running slower, and it gets harder to start and harder to start, and it wants to backfire through the intake or the exhaust a lot, chances are the valves are tight. And you're going to set those about 2,000 clearance, and they're easy to get to. Don't be ham-fisted when you're tightening lock nuts for the rocker arm adjusters. Those things will snap the rockers right off. 2,000 clearance, cold. You don't want it hot when you're checking it. Just do it cold. And really, that's about it for this thing. I'm just gonna change oil on it now and finish changing the oil. Put the chain on there, bolt up the harness, and we should be good to go. All right, if you like my content, please like, share, subscribe, comment, all that jazz. Hit the notification bell. I don't always work on these little ATVs, but I have worked on them for years. For the amount of money you're paying for them, it is what it is. You know, it's a little cheap ATV for a kid to ride around on. And you know, you keep on top of the maintenance on them, and they actually do pretty good for what they are. It's just a copy of an old Honda CT motor that the Japanese had to give the Chinese in reparations from World War II. They're not as good as the Honda ones, but you know, eventually maybe their metallurgy and machining practices will get up to where it needs to be. I doubt it, but who knows? There's no commonization on stuff on this thing, wiring harness especially. I had to buy a bunch of switches to get the right switch for this thing because they're all different. You know, one of them had the wrong connectors on it. The other one had the wiring was totally wrong for the switch housing. Just all kinds of stuff like that. And it is what it is. Well, that's it for this one. That's long enough. I'm done. I'll see you next time. Thank you.